date the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. For that reason, Congress has returned to the Capitol. We always knew that this responsibility would take us into the night and will stay as long as it takes. Our purpose will be accomplished. We must and we will show to the country, and indeed to the world, that we will not be diverted from our duty, that we will respect our responsibility to the Constitution and to the American people. On Sunday, it was my great honor to be sworn in as Speaker and to preside over a sacred ritual of renewal as we gathered under this dome of this temple of democracy to open the 117th Congress. I said that as we were sworn in then, we accept a responsibility as daunting and demanding as any previous generation of leadership has ever faced. We know that we're in difficult times, but little could we have imagined the assault that was made on our democracy today. To those who strove to deter us from our responsibility, you have failed. To those who engaged in the gleeful desecration of this, our temple of democracy, American democracy, justice will be done. Today, January 6th, is the Feast of the Epiphany. On this day of revelation, let us pray that this instigation to violence will provide an epiphany for our country to heal. In that spirit of healing, I evoke the song of St. Francis. I usually do. St. Francis is the patron saint of my city of San Francisco, and his song of St. Francis is our anthem. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. Where there is darkness, may I bring light. Where there is hatred, let us bring love. Where there is despair, let us bring hope. We know that we would be part of history in a positive way today, every 4 years, when we demonstrate again the peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next. And despite the shameful actions of today, we still will do so. We will be part of a history that shows the world what America is made of. That this assault is just that. It shows the weakness of those who had to show through violence what their message was. My colleagues, it's time to move on. I wear this pin quite frequently. Actually, I gave it to our beloved John Lewis just the weekend or so before he left us. And it's a flag of our country, a flag of the United States of America. On it, it says, one country, one destiny. One country, one destiny, written on the flag. That was also what was embroidered in Abraham Lincoln's coat that he had on that fateful night. Lincoln's party, Lincoln's message, one country, one destiny. So on this holy day of Epiphany, let us pray. I'm a big believer in prayer. Let us pray that there will be peace on earth and that it will begin with us. Let us pray that God will continue to bless America. And with that, let us proceed with our responsibilities to the Constitution, to which we have just within 72 hours taken the oath to uphold. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, it is a sad day in America. It is a wrenching day in America. It is a day in which our words and our actions have had consequences of a very, very negative nature. We ought to watch our words and think what it may mean to some. My remarks were written before the tragic, dangerous, and unacceptable actions. And unacceptable is such a tame word. My remarks started with, Madam Speaker, the American people today are witnessing one of the greatest challenges to our democracy in its 244-year history. Little did I know that this Capitol would be attacked by the enemy within. I was here on 9/11 when we were attacked by the enemy without. We need to all work together to tame and reduce the anger, and yes, the hate that some stoke. What some, not all, Madam Speaker, but some in this House and in this Senate are doing today will not change the outcome of the election, which is the clear and insurmountable victory of President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. Instead, all they will accomplish is to further the dangerous divisions. This was written before this Capitol was assaulted, before this democracy was put aside by thousands. Encouraged by the Commander-in-Chief. Instead, all they will accomplish is to further the dangerous divisions, as I said, among our people and energize conspiracy theories stoked by our foreign adversaries, which seek to erode America's confidence in our democracy and our system of free and fair elections. I was here in 2000. I was strongly in favor of Al Gore for president. And my candidate got more votes than the other candidate. His name was George Bush, of course. And one of the saddest days was January 20th of 2001, when our candidate, who won the election, in my view, was not elected. But it was also one of the proudest moments of my career, because the greatest power on earth passed peacefully from Bill Clinton to George W. Bush. Not a shot was fired. Nobody assaulted this caucus or this Congress or this chamber. Because we were not disappointed? No. Because we were not angry? No. Because we believe in democracy. We believe in we the people. And the way the people, one of the speakers, I think it was the senator from Texas, expressed, we're here for the people. If those were the people, we're in a lot of trouble. Our electoral system, our democratic system, however, did not break under the strains of the misinformation, the claims of fraud, which court after court after court have dismissed out of hand. Not because there was a little evidence, because there was no evidence. That's why we're the longest lasting constitutional democracy in the world. I hope all of us in this body are proud of that and understand why that's the case. Because, as Dick Gephardt said on this floor many years ago, democracy is a substitute for war to resolve differences. It proved once more the ever-beating strong heart that gives life to our republic and our freedoms. That strength, Madam Speaker, is derived in part from our institution and our laws. But most importantly, it is powered by citizens and leaders' commitment to our Constitution. Not just us, we swear an oath. But it's all of America. Barack Obama spoke from that chamber and he said, I'm going to be taking another title next year, citizen. And he was proud to take that. And every citizen needs to protect, preserve, and uplift our democracy. Some today did not do that. Many today. 68 years ago in Springfield, Illinois, Governor Adlai Stevenson gracefully conceded his loss to General Dwight Eisenhower. He said this, it is traditionally American. He told his deeply disappointed supporters to fight hard before an election. But then he added, it is equally traditional to close ranks as soon as the people have spoken. Not the Congress, not the electors, the people have spoken. That which unites us as American citizens is far greater than that which divides us as political parties. It was another man from Springfield, 68 years earlier, who won re-election to the presidency in a national crisis that tested our country and its democratic institutions, who pleaded even in his hour of victory for the same spirit of reconciliation. That was the party of Lincoln. That hasn't happened to this hour. Lincoln said, now that the election is over, he asked, may not all, having a common interest, reunite in a common effort to save our common country? Such is the duty of an American who stands for elections or participates in our politics, to be either humble in triumph or gracious in defeat. I've lost some elections, not too many, and I've won a lot of elections. And I hope that I've been gracious in defeat and humble in victory. I hope that I put my state and my country first, not myself. It is clear to all that the outgoing president has not followed the path that Stevenson and Lincoln urged. So we, the people, each one of us represents about 750 to 800,000 people, some a few less. The people. And they've spoken in the way that our Constitution set for them to be heard by us and by the country. They voted. And they voted pretty decisively. We, the people, together must turn away from divisions and its dangers. The senior member of our body, Don Young from Alaska, spoke the other day when we were sworn in and said, ladies and gentlemen of this House, we are so divisive that it's going to destroy our country. We need to reach out and hold one another's hands. We all have a title that we honor more than any other. Perhaps parent, perhaps husband, but we are all Americans. Not Americans are, not Americans D. We are Americans. Let us hope tonight, that we act like Americans, not as D's and R's, but as Americans. Just as Al Gore, just as Hillary Clinton just as Adlai Stevenson, just as Abraham Lincoln, who had won that election, of course. But he had defeated people, and he said, that's not the issue. The issue is to reunite. We, the people, must again be the strong heart of our American democracy. We, the people, on this day in Congress must be agents of unity and constructive action to face the grave threats that confront us and tell those who would assault our Capitol, that is not the American way. And we, the members of Congress, who swore an oath before God to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States and our democracy, must do so. Now, I don't usually read Senator McConnell's speeches, but I'm not speaking as a Democrat, nor was he speaking as a Republican. Just a few hours ago, we're debating a step that has never been taken in American history, whether Congress should overrule the voters and overturn a presidential election. He went on to say that he supports a strong state-led voting reform. The Constitution, he said, gives us here in Congress a limited role. We cannot simply declare ourselves a national board of elections on steroids. The voters, the courts, and the states, the voters, the courts, and the states have all spoken. 5 people said the election of 2000 was over. We didn't agree with them. But Al Gore said, we are a nation of laws. 5 people. Yes, they were members of the Supreme Court, but they were 5 people said the election is over. And I sat on that podium and saw that power transferred to George W. Bush. McConnell went on to say, if we overrule them, it would damage our republic forever. He said that, McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, about 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago now, 4 hours. He went on to say, if this election were overturned by mere allegations from the losing side, our democracy would enter a death spiral. He concluded it would be unfair and wrong to disenfranchise American voters and overrule the courts and states on this extraordinarily thin basis. And I will not pretend such a vote would be a harmless protest gesture. How presciently he spoke. People who think that the election has been stolen, there's some fraud. Why do they think it? Because the commander-in-chief said so. And they respect him and they follow him. And words matter. Repeat as he ended, I will not pretend such a vote would be a harmless protest gesture while relying on others to do the right thing. I will vote to respect the people's decision and defend our system of government as we know it. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this objection, as McConnell said, a danger to our democracy. And I yield back the balance of my time.
We've heard 6 Republicans that will sign. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I rise for the point of personal privilege to address the House for 5 minutes.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
5 minutes.
I rise to address what happened in this chamber today and where do we go from here. The violence, destruction, and chaos we saw earlier was unacceptable, undemocratic, and un-American. It was the saddest day I've ever had as serving as a member of this institution. The Capitol was in chaos. Police officers were attacked. Guns were drawn on this very floor. a woman tragically lost her life. No one wins when this building and what it stands for are destroyed. America and this institution is better than this. We saw the worst of America this afternoon, yet in the midst of violence and fear, we also saw the best of America. It starts with our law enforcement, the Capitol Police, the National Guard. The FBI, the Secret Service, who faced the most difficult challenges but did their duty with confidence and strength. Many of them are injured right now. And it also extends to this chamber, where both Democrats and Republicans showed courage, calm, and resolve. I'd like to recognize the members now who helped to hold the line. Mark Wayne Mullen, Tony Gonzalez, Jason Crow, Pat Fallon, and Troy Nels. Working with the Capitol Police, they ensured the floor of this chamber was never breached. These are the heroes among us. Thank you for this sign of courage. Looking back on the past few hours, it is clear this Congress will not be the same after today. And I hope it will be the better. I hope not just this institution, but I hope every American pauses for that moment and thinks among themselves that we can disagree with one another but not dislike each other. We can respect the voices of others. There's many times we debate on this body, and we should. There's many times we can get heated. I still consider Steny Hoyer a very good friend. There's times I get upset. I'll call him at home to express what things I may not see fair or just. But that's the way we should handle things. The majority leader is right. We are all Americans first. But should we also think for a moment, what do we put on social media? What do we convey to one another? Just because you have a personal opinion different than mine, you have a right to say it, but nobody has a right to become a mob. And we all should stand united in condemning the mob together. We solve problems before our nation not through destruction, but through debate. That is the heart of this democracy. I know what we debate today is tough, but it's just, it's right. This isn't the first side of the aisle that's ever debated this issue. I thought what Madam Speaker said back in 2005, this is democracy at its best, when they talked about a presidential election in Ohio. These are the moments that we should raise the issue about integrity and accountability and accuracy in our elections. But you know what we should do, the next difference? Not just raise the issue, but work together to solve the problems. Now is the moment. Now is the moment to show America we can work best together. I will tell you, the size of the majority is slim, so it gives us the opportunity to make that happen. The only thing that can hold us back is the will of one another to do it. This side of the aisle always believes in working with anybody who wants to move it forward. That does not mean that we're going to agree 100% of the time. That does not mean our voice cannot be heard. That does not mean we cannot be treated fairly. We should be. That may mean on the size of committees. That means on our ability to offer an amendment. It means on our ability to have our voice. But at the end of the day, it helps us come to a better conclusion. By returning here to complete the work we were sent to do, we are proving that our democracy cannot be disrupted by criminal behavior. We will not falter, we will not bend, and we will not shrink from our duty. Let me be very clear. Mobs don't rule America. Laws rule America. It was true when our cities were burning this summer, and it's true now. When Americans go to bed tonight, their lasting memory should not be a Congress overrun by rioters. It must be a resolute Congress conducting healthy debate. We may not disagree on a lot in America, but tonight we must show the world that we will respectfully but thoroughly carry out the most basic duties of democracy. We will continue with the task that we have been sent here to do. We will follow the Constitution and the law and the process for hearing valid concerns about election integrity. We'll do it with respect. We will respect your opinion. We'll respect what you say, and we're willing to listen to it. I think the nation will be better for it on both sides of the aisle. Let's show the country the mob did not win. We have a job to do it. Let's do it with pride, and let's be better when the sun rises tomorrow. With that, I yield back, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the objection. Over the last few hours, we have seen the consequences of dangerous, un-American rhetoric, an armed insurrection against the seat of government of the most powerful country on earth, a breach of this Capitol building to attack Congress, something that has not taken place since the British occupied this building during the War of 1812, an attempted coup spurred by rhetoric coming from those who are looking out for themselves, not country. And it is stunning, Madam Speaker, that there are some in this House who have voiced support for what happened. It was not a protest. It was treason. It was sedition, and it should be prosecuted as such. At its root is a disease that has infected our politics, one that will make some political leaders do anything, including lie and incite violence to hold on to power. That's what we're seeing before our very eyes. In contesting the outcome of this election, my Republican colleagues make contradictory argument that puts party and power before country. They argue the election results were valid when it showed they won their races, but the same ballots were somehow fraudulent when it produced a result President Trump did not like. Keep the results we like, they demand. Cancel the one we don't. That's not how democracy works, and neither is armed insurrection. Here's the truth. Arizona has a long bipartisan record of conducting safe, secure, and fair elections. And I say that as someone whose party has more often than not been on the losing end of those elections. This last election was once again safe and secure. And I commend our state and county election officials, public servants on both sides of the aisle for making Arizona proud once again. We are here because the case that Republicans have brought before us has failed in court over and over and over again. My colleagues say, let's go back to the state. Let them decide. My friends, Arizona has spoken. They have sent the correct electors. Arizona's Republican Attorney General one of the most partisan in the country, said, quote, "There is no evidence, there are no facts that would lead anyone to believe the election results will change," unquote. The Republican Speaker of our state house has told us he doesn't like the results of the election, but they are the right results. Joe Biden has won Arizona. The state Supreme Court, made up entirely of justices appointed by Republican governors, they have spoken too. The court said the president's challenge, quote, "fails to present any evidence of misconduct, illegal votes, or that the Biden electors did not in fact receive the highest numbers of votes for office," end quote. Look to the words of one of the president's own campaign chairs in my state, our governor, Doug Ducey. Our governor, he loves the president. He's been so loyal. He made sure the president could hold large rallies in our state in the middle of a pandemic. The governor personally attended them. They spoke so often that the governor gave the president a special "Hail to the Chief" ringtone on his phone. After Election Day, as the legal challenges played out, the governor kept quiet. But when the truth became clear, even he acknowledged, quote, "Joe Biden did win Arizona," unquote. And I'm grateful that, in this instance, the governor put law, not partisan politics, first. And I urge my colleagues in the House to follow his lead. Each and every one of us in this House, the People's House, swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Over the last few hours, we have gained a better understanding of what that means. The future of the Constitution, the most precious of the founding documents of the greatest democracy humankind has ever known, is in our hands. Defending democracy is not and should not be a partisan task. It is a sacred one. Right here, right now, we must recognize that fidelity to the founding principles of our nation are not about loyalty to one man, but rather to ensure that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. The world is watching us all right now. We must get it right. Reject this ill-conceived attack on our democracy. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Jim. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise to support the objection.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise with a heavy heart. This has been a truly tragic day for America, and we all join together in fully condemning the dangerous violence and destruction that occurred today in our nation's capital. Americans will always have the freedom of speech and the constitutional right to protest, but violence in any form is absolutely unacceptable. It is anti-American and must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Thank you to the heroic United States Capitol Police, and thank you to the bipartisan professional staff of the United States Capitol for protecting the People's House and the American people. This hallowed temple of democracy is where generations of Americans have peacefully come together to face our nation's greatest challenges, bridge our deepest fissures, and create a more perfect system of government. This is the appropriate place we stand to respectfully and peacefully give voice to the people we represent across our diverse country. The representatives of the American people in this House are standing up for 3 fundamental American beliefs. The right to vote is sacred, that a representative has a duty to represent his or her constituents, and that the rule of law is a hallmark of our nation. And in the spirit of healing, those are not my words, those are the words of you, Madam Speaker, from this very chamber, when some of my colleagues and friends across the aisle objected to the 2005 Electoral College certification. In fact, there were objections on this floor to the certification of nearly every Republican president in my lifetime. In 1989, in 2001, in 2005, and in 2017. So history is our guide that the people's sacred house is the appropriate venue for a peaceful debate. And this peaceful debate serves as a powerful condemnation to the violence that perpetrated our Capitol grounds today, the violence that was truly un-American. Today's discussion is about the Constitution, and it is about the American people, but it must also be about clearly and resolutely condemning the violence that occurred today. I am honored each and every day to represent New York's 21st Congressional District, and I believe it is my solemn and sacred duty to serve as their voice and their vote in the people's house. Tens of millions of Americans are concerned that the 2020 election featured unconstitutional overreach by unelected state officials and judges ignoring state election laws. We can and we should peacefully and respectfully discuss these concerns. In Pennsylvania, the state Supreme Court and Secretary of State unilaterally and unconstitutionally rewrote election law, eliminating signature matching requirements. In Georgia, there was constitutional overreach when the Secretary of State unilaterally and unconstitutionally gutted signature matching for absentee ballots and, in essence, eliminated voter verification required by state election law. In Wisconsin, officials issued illegal rules to circumvent a state law passed by the legislature as the Constitution requires, that required absentee voters to provide photo identification before obtaining a ballot. And in Michigan, signed affidavits document numerous unconstitutional irregularities. Officials physically blocking the legal right of poll watchers to observe vote counts, the illegal counting of late ballots, and hand-stamping ballots with the previous day's date. My North Country constituents and the American people cherish the Constitution, and they know, according to the Constitution, elected officials closest to the people in state legislatures have the power of the pen to write election law, not unelected bureaucrats, judges, governors, or secretaries of state. To the tens of thousands of constituents who have reached out to me, thank you. Please know that I'm listening and I hear you, both those who agree and those who disagree. Our constitutional republic will endure this tragic day because the Founding Fathers understood Congress and the American people would face unprecedented and historic challenges by debating them on this very floor. I believe that the most precious foundation and the covenant of our republic is the right to vote and the faith in the sanctity of our nation's free and fair elections. And we must work together in this House to rebuild that faith so that our elections are free, fair, secure, and safe, and most importantly, that they are according to the United States Constitution, and I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Boyd? Where's he from? Texas. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to the objection, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, today the People's House was attacked, which is an attack on the Republic itself. There is no excuse for it. A woman died, and people need to go to jail. And the president should never have spun up certain Americans to believe something that simply cannot be. I applaud House leadership of both parties for bringing us back to do our job, which is to count the electors and no more. The problem we face, though, is even bigger. We are deeply divided. We are divided about even life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the words which used to bind us together. Now at times tear us apart because we disagree about what they even mean. My constituents at home in Texas are genuinely upset, I say to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, about a constant barrage of those who wish to remake America into a socialist welfare state, efforts to attack our institutions, tear down statues, erase our history, defund our police. We've seen the debasing of our language. We teach our children that America is evil. We destroy our sovereignty and power cartels. We attack our Second Amendment. We've destroyed small businesses through lockdowns. We divide ourselves by race, and we can't even agree that there is man and woman, and we extinguish the unborn before they even have a chance to see daylight. But at the heart of our path forward lies the essence of our republic, its cornerstone, that we are a union of states bound together for common defense and economic strength, and more so bound together through federalism in which we may live together peaceably as citizens in this vast land, agreeing to disagree, free to live according to our own beliefs and according to the dictates of our conscience. Now, many of my colleagues were poised this afternoon to vote to insert Congress into the constitutionally prescribed decision-making of the states by rejecting the sole official electors sent to us by each of the states of the Union. I hope they will reconsider. I can tell you that I was not going to, and I will not be voting to reject the electors. And that vote may well sign my political death warrant, but so be it. I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and I will not bend its words into contortions for personal political expediency. Number one, rejecting the electors certified to Congress by sovereign states violates the 12th Amendment and the entirety of the Constitution it amends. Notwithstanding claims that you must read certain sections first, it is clear, it is black and white, we count. It is ministerial, and our only job is to count the electors before us. We have only one slate of electors per state sent to us under color of law and no more. Number two, to the extent you believe we do have constitutional authority to reject, we are arguing using incomplete and often misleading data points to prove it. I'm not afforded time to go point by point, but there are more misleading claims than legitimate ones. Three, rejecting the electors ignores the founders' specific admonition that Congress not choose the president, as articulated in Federalist 68. Indeed, in fourth point, the founders drafted the inclusion of a phrase specifically putting Congress into the manner of the election process, then specifically rejected it. Five, if more than a trivial block of this body votes to reject a sovereign state's electors, it will irrevocably empower Congress to take over the selection of presidential electors. And doing so will almost certainly guarantee future houses will vote to reject the electors of Texas or any of our states for whatever reason. Six, voting to reject the electors is not remotely consistent with our vote on Sunday, a vote I forced to highlight the very hypocrisy to accept the outcome of the election of ourselves through elections conducted under the same rules by procedures put in place by the same executive branch officials, impacted by rulings from the same judges, state and federal. To do so is entirely inexplicable on its face. The argument for rejection most given by my colleagues is based on the allegations of systemic election abuse by executive or judicial branch officials interfering with the legislatures thereof in Article 2. Many states made poor policy decisions. Whether these poor policy decisions violate state law is a contested matter and a matter for the states to resolve for themselves. More, 5 of the 6 legislatures are controlled by Republicans. Not one body has sent separate electors. Not one body has sent us even a letter by a majority of its whole body. The only body, the Pennsylvania Senate, who managed to come up with a majority of Republicans to complain, only did so yesterday in an 11th hour face-saving political statement. Not one GOP statewide official has formally called on us to change. Not one law enforcement organization, state or federal, has presented a case of malfeasance. History will judge this moment. Let us not turn the last firewall for liberty we have remaining on its head in a fit of populist rage for political expediency, when there's plenty of looking into the mirror for Republicans to do for destroying our election systems with expansion of mail-in ballots. I may well get attacked by this, but I will not abandon my oath to the Constitution.
Has expired.
And I will make clear that I'm standing up in defense of that Constitution to protect our Federalist order in the Electoral College, which empowers the very states we represent to stand athwart the long arm of the federal government.
Sorry.
I submit this respectfully and humbly.
Emma, that's different. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
I rise in support of the objection.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, for years, Democrats and their media allies deceived America about Trump-Russian collusion and the extent of foreign interference in the 2016 elections. Yet in 2020, Democrats promoted massive foreign interference in American elections by helping illegal aliens and other non-citizens vote in American elections, thereby canceling the votes of and stealing elections from American citizens. Want evidence? Exhibit A. In 1993, Democrats rammed through Congress the National Voter Registration Act, making it illegal to require proof of citizenship that prevents illegal aliens and non-citizens from registering to vote. Why did Democrats do that? Simple. To steal elections, of course. Exhibit B, how bad is the non-citizen voting problem? In 2005, Democrat President Jimmy Carter's Commission on Federal Election Reform warned that, quote, non-citizens have registered to vote in several recent elections, end quote, and recommended that, quote, all states should use their best efforts to obtain proof of citizenship before registering voters, end quote. Exhibit C, a June 2005 General Accountability Office report discovered that up to 3% of people on voter registration lists are not U.S. citizens. Exhibit D, in 2008, Electoral Study surveyed 339 non-citizens. 8% admitted voting in American elections. As an aside, I have seen higher percentages in other studies. Exhibit E, the 2010 census counted 11 million illegal aliens in America. Exhibit F, a 2018 Yale study estimated as many as 22 million illegal aliens in America. Exhibit G, the math means between 880,000 and 1.72 million illegal aliens illegally voted in the 2020 elections. Exhibit H, in 2014, Old Dominion University and George Mason University professors surveyed non-citizens and illegal aliens and found they vote Democrat roughly 80% of the time. Exhibit I, the math is again straightforward. The 60% Biden advantage times the illegal alien voting number means Joe Biden gained roughly 1,032,000 votes from illegal alien voting. That's the high number. Exhibit J, while no one knows for sure how massive the illegal alien voting bloc is, we do know Joe Biden and his campaign believed it large enough and critical enough to winning the presidential race that at the October 22nd presidential debate, Joe Biden publicly solicited the illegal alien bloc vote by promising, quote, within 100 days, I'm going to send to the United States Congress a pathway to citizenship for over 11 million undocumented people. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Speaker, that is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for illegal aliens. Joe Biden knew exactly what he was doing by seeking the illegal alien bloc vote. After all, on May 11, 1993, then Senator Joe Biden voted for the National Voter Registration Act that makes it illegal to require proof of citizenship from illegal aliens and other non-citizens when they seek to register to vote. Madam Speaker, the evidence is compelling and irrefutable. Non-citizens overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden in exchange for the promised amnesty and citizenship, and in so doing, helped steal the election from Donald Trump, Republican candidates, and American citizens across America. Madam Speaker, in my judgment, if only lawful votes cast by eligible American citizens are counted, Joe Biden lost and President Trump won the Electoral College. As such, it is my constitutional duty to promote honest and accurate elections by rejecting Electoral College vote submissions from states whose electoral systems are so badly flawed as to render their vote submissions unreliable, untrustworthy, and unworthy of acceptance. Madam Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time to the opposition.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York State seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a proud Republican, I rise in opposition to the objection to the electors.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I come to this side of the aisle as a proud Republican, but most importantly, as a proud American. Today we saw an assault on our democracy. I love this institution. I love the United States Congress, and I love the United States of America. And what I saw today was mob rule that spat upon the blood of my father, that is in the soil of Europe and in the soil of Korea, and who gave us, through that blood, this sacred Constitution and the sacred ability to lead this world as a power that says we settle our differences not with mob rule, we settle our differences through elections. And when those elections are over, we have a peaceful transition of power. Now, make no mistake to my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle. I will be passionate in my disagreement with you. I will be passionate in my ideas for the future of this country. And I will fight for my Republican ideas that I hold near and dear. But I will stand with you tonight and send a message to the nation and all Americans that what we saw today was not American, and what we see tonight in this body shall be what we do in America, and that is to transfer power in a peaceful way. And with that, I yield to my best friend in Congress and a Democrat, Josh Gottheimer, my co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus.
I thank my friend for yielding and for standing with me and with all of us. Tom Reed is my co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. He's a Republican and I'm a Democrat. When it comes to policy views, we often disagree. But at the end of the day, we are united as Americans. My good friend like me always puts country first. Today, a group of lawless thugs sought to upend the Constitution and the peaceful transition of power because they didn't like the outcome of the presidential election. So they tried to nullify it using improvised explosives, shattering windows, breaking down doors, injuring law enforcement, and even tearing down the American flag that rises above this beacon of democracy. But their attempt to obstruct democracy failed. Their insurrection was foiled. The American people and the greatest democracy the world has ever known won. Abraham Lincoln, who served in this very body, famously said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." That's why, for the sake of this country, we must stand together, united, and celebrate a peaceful transition of power. In 14 days, President-elect Biden will be sworn in, and despite all of our differences, I have faith that for the American people, we will come together, Democrats and Republicans, committed to unity, civility, and truth. We will recognize our higher purpose to help America through these dark days. That is the only way we will beat COVID, rebuild our economy, and stand up to threats at home and abroad. Working together as Democrats and Republicans, I know our best days will always be ahead of us. I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I encourage my colleagues to always search their conscience and their souls. And I respect my Republican colleagues and my Democratic colleagues. But today, let us pause and remember what happened here today. Let us pause that our tenure in this Congress will far surpass the time that we stay here. And let us pass and cast our votes today, recognizing that what we do here today will set the course of this institution for years to come. And this institution, Madam Speaker, shall not fail, because the United States of America shall forever be the beacon of hope, the inspiration to all, and may God bless our great country. I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the objection.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My constitutional oath is sacred, and I have a duty to speak out about confirmed, evidence-filled issues with the administration of the 2020 presidential election in certain battleground states. signature verification, ballot observation, voter roll integrity, voter ID requirements, and ballot collection protections were weakened on top of the millions of mailboxes that were flooded with unrequested mail-in ballots. Many of my constituents have been outraged and demanding that I voice their objections here today. This debate is necessary because rogue election officials, secretaries of state, and courts circumvented state election laws. They made massive changes to how their state's election would be run. These acts, among other issues, were unlawful and unconstitutional. Congress has the duty to defend the Constitution and any powers of state legislatures that were usurped. Some claim today's objections set new precedent by challenging state electors. That claim, of course, ignores that Democrats have objected every time a Republican presidential candidate has won an election over the past generation. If you don't have any objections today, that's your call, but don't lecture about precedent. Over the past 4 years, Democrats boycotted President Trump's inauguration and State of the Union addresses, pushed the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracies and investigations and knowingly lied about it, voted to impeach the president before even knowing what to impeach him for, and then actually passed articles of impeachment before Senate Democrats voted to remove him from office. Today's debate is necessary, especially because of the insistence that everything President Trump and his supporters say about the 2020 election is evidence-free. That's simply not true. No one can honestly claim it's evidence-free when I say that in Arizona, courts unilaterally extended the legislatively set deadline to register to vote. The Arizona State Senate issued subpoenas post-election to get information from the Maricopa County Board on various election matters. But the board and the courts refused to help at all to let the state Senate complete its constitutional duties. In Pennsylvania, where state legislators wrote us about their powers being usurped, the Democrat majority on the state Supreme Court changed signature matching, and postal marking requirements. The date to submit mail-in ballots was extended, contradictory to the date set by state law. The state legislature expanded no-excuse mail-in balloting without a constitutional amendment. Constitutions apply to the acts of all branches of government. The issue is magnified by the voter rolls being so inaccurate that more voters submitted ballots than there were registered voters. Signature authentication rules for absentee and mail-in ballots were weakened by the Democrat Secretary of the Commonwealth without authorization. Ballot defects were allowed to be cured in some counties, but not others. There were poll watchers denied the ability to closely observe ballot counting operations. In Georgia, the Secretary of State unilaterally entered into a settlement agreement with the Democratic Party, changing statutory requirements for confirming voter identity. Challenging defective signatures was made far more difficult, and the settlement even required election officials to consider issuing training materials drafted by an expert retained by the Democratic Party. In Wisconsin, election officials assisted voters on how to circumvent the state's voter ID laws and signature verification laws, while also placing unmanned drop boxes in locations picked to boost Democrat turnout. The Democracy in the Park event in Wisconsin had over 17,000 ballots transferred that shouldn't have been. These are all facts, and certainly not evidence-free. Americans deserve nothing less than full faith and confidence in their elections, and a guarantee that their vote, their voice counts, and that their concerns are being heard. That's why we need to have this debate today, whether you like it or not. This isn't about us. This is about our Constitution, our elections. This is about our people and our republic. I yield back.
Manuel Diego. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I am the proud son of immigrants. Growing up, I heard stories about parties, politicians, and presidents invalidating elections from the people that took power for themselves. That's why when I joined the Marine Corps, the most sacred part of my oath was to protect the Constitution of the United States. I never thought I would have to do that on the floor of Congress. But here we are. The people have spoken, and the power of the people, the Constitution, will be preserved. Madam Speaker, I left my youth. I left my sanity. I left it all in Iraq for this country. Because there was this one precious idea that we all had, that we all believed, that this country was going to protect everyone's individual rights, that you were going to be able to vote, that you were going to be able to preserve democracy and pass it on as a legacy, as an inheritance to every American. But today there was treason in this house. Today there was traitors in this house. So I'm not asking my Republican colleagues to help me and stop this objection to Arizona. I'm asking you to get off all these objections. It is time for you to save your soul. It is time for you to save your country. That man at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue will forget you. He will use you, and he will dump you to the side. But what will be left will be the stain of democracy that you are engaging in right now. Listen to yourselves. I consider most of you very smart, believe it or not. But the idea that we would rig an election for the president but not preserve the congressional seats for all of our friends that we just lost in the last election is absurd. The idea that we would help Vice President Biden win but wouldn't make sure that we got enough senators in the Senate for us to pass our full agenda is absurd. The idea that there was somehow nefarious voter registration in Arizona that tipped the scale, when because during that same time of voter registration, there were more registered voters that were Republican than Democrats. You are better than this. Many of you did serve. Many of you have never served. But there is an opportunity and a time for courage. I hope you never have to face fire or bullets or bombs for your country. But right now, this country is asking you to be better. Right now, this country is asking you to show courage. That man will leave. Your soul will stay with you for the rest of your life. You owe it to democracy. You owe it to the hundreds and thousands of men and women that have sacrificed their life. You know better. You are better. Be the good American. Be the American you want. Preserve this democracy. Reject this movement. And stop this terrorism that is happening from the White House. I yield back my time.
Members are reminded to redirect their remarks to the chair. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To speak in favor of the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, it's been quite a day. And in contrast to the gentleman's comments just now, I couldn't get over this text that I received from the mayor of Charlotte, Vi Lyles, about 30 minutes ago. She is a progressive Democrat, political opponent for years, tremendously graceful person. She said, "Representative Bishop, I hope you're safe and well. It must have been a day of anguish for the world to see our Capitol buildings under siege. I know you have a long night ahead and want you to know I was thinking about you, your family, and staff. God bless, Vi." Back home, the generosity of spirit still exists. And I understand the sharp words and feelings on the other side tonight. But there are also good people back home. And I've heard from many, many, many of them. And news would suggest there are millions of Americans. That's a big number. Millions, tens of millions who believe something went awry in this election. And they aren't dumb. They aren't mindless. They don't believe things simply because the president says them. There were problems. I know that Joe Biden will be president. But I don't know that it hurts or would hurt any of us to have the generosity of spirit to continue to reflect on what might be better or what might seriously have gone wrong here, even if you reject the notion that the result was wrong. I'd like to offer a slightly different perspective, a distinct perspective. Perhaps it will be rejected. I think if I were sitting on the other side of the aisle, it would be very difficult for me to listen to tonight. But you all have heard it said, and it certainly is true, that many executive branch officials around the nation departed from state legislatures' enacted laws. I think it's less understood how this came to pass. It was not a spontaneous, independent decision-making, but it resulted, I would argue, from a coordinated nationwide partisan plan. And the fact and scope of the plan, it really isn't disputed. If you go to democracydocket.com, it is the website of Mark Elias, the National Democratic election lawyer, who appeared in hundreds of cases across the country in the course of the election year. This plan was not a response to COVID, by the way. It pre-existed that, and his website shows that as well. He explained that in January 2020. It was a chaos strategy, a plan to flood state and federal courts with hundreds of simultaneous election year lawsuits aimed at displacing state legislative control. Now, as I've seen it, only the most experienced and independent judges appear to have recognized what was afoot. In the Fourth Circuit, dissenting judges Wilkinson and Agee said this: "Let's understand the strategy that is being deployed here. Our country is now plagued with a proliferation of pre-election litigation." And as they put it, 385 election year cases to that point on October 20th. And they referred to the website healthyelections.org to verify that. Around the country, they wrote, courts are changing the rules of the upcoming elections at the last minute. It makes the promise of the Constitution's elections and electors clauses into a farce. This was a political operation masquerading as a judicial one. And in keeping with that, it featured gross breaches of litigation ethics, forum shopping, repetitive suits after losses, and collusive settlements with cooperating Democratic officials of state and local governments. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what led to officials changing the rules in state after state, mainly through consent orders or the preliminary unreviewed decisions of state and federal trial judges inclined by partisanship or having limited experience with the electors clause. In turn, the displacement of rules set by state legislatures led to chaotic conditions on the ground, about which so many Americans are angry and disheartened. I think we can do better. I think that strategy was unwise. And I think, particularly in light of what's happened here today, we should. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise tonight in opposition to the objection.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Speaker. As a nation, we have endured trying times and overcome many challenges. And now we face an unprecedented effort to ignore the will of the American people and the people of Arizona. Given the facts, the unprecedented events of tonight, this effort must be finished, and America can be united again. That is going to take leadership. We are all leaders. We are elected to be leaders. And if we're going to do that, we have to do it from the respect to others, the idea that truth is important, that factual content is important, that we're going to tell the American people what is going on in this country and not what we hope they hear from a 30-second soundbite. I used to be a homicide investigator. My job was to follow the facts, develop a case, make decisions and recommendations based on where those facts led me. Following the process means that decisions cannot be made on rumors and innuendos alone. I am proud to say that Arizona has used mail-in voting for over 2 decades. Both Republicans and Democrats have long been proud of how our state has administered elections. In 2020, over 65% of eligible Arizonans voted in record number. Our Republican governor, Republican attorney general, Democratic secretary of state, and our state's election administrators and volunteers worked with integrity to administer a fair election. We saw turnout increase in both Republican and Democratic areas, and in fact, more Republicans registered this election than any other party. I am proud that many of our tribal, rural, and underserved communities voted in record numbers, all during a pandemic. In 2020, Arizona's made their voices heard. The fact is, multiple federal, state judges, agencies, state elected officials concluded the winner was Joe Biden. In Arizona, this process was administered and overseen by officials from both parties. Elections officials conducted random, hand-counted audits of many precincts. They confirmed there were no errors that would change the result of the election. The fact is that the Republican chairman of Maricopa County, the largest Republican county in the state, the biggest population county, he stated more than 2 million ballots were cast, and there was no evidence of fraud or misconduct or malfunction. He concluded, no matter how you voted, this election was administered with integrity, transparency, and in accordance with state laws. The fact is, the president and his campaign and several Republican-led groups filed 8 election lawsuits, all of which were dismissed. The Arizona Supreme Court, a body where all justices have been appointed by Republican governors, unanimously dismissed the case. The justices found that the party had failed to present any evidence of misconduct or illegal votes, let alone establish any degree of fraud or a significant error rate that would undermine the certainty of the election results. After these judicial rulings, the governor said, "I trust our election system. There's integrity in our election system." The fact is, Joe Biden is the certified winner of Arizona's 11 electoral votes. Arizona's elected and appointed officials from both parties followed the facts and came to this conclusion. I urge my colleagues to do the same. To my colleagues across the aisle, I know we may disagree on who we want as president, but what we personally want is not what matters here. Rather, the people's influence, as reflected in the certified Electoral College results, is what matters. Facts matter. Undermining faith in our election process by attempting to mislead the American public only serves to weaken us and make us vulnerable to foreign actors who would do us harm. For the good of our country, this must stop. Now is the time to come together to preserve our democracy and to protect our national security. I know my constituents are looking to Congress to move past its divisions, find common ground, and pass legislation to improve the lives of struggling families. We must stay focused on fighting the pandemic. We must work to ensure all Americans can be vaccinated as soon as possible so we can save American lives. Safely reopen schools, get people back to work, and visit loved ones again. I urge my colleagues to follow this, and Madam Speaker, I yield.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise to claim time in support of the objection.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes without objection.
Madam Speaker, one of the first things we did when the House convened today was to join together to extend our grace and our kindness and our concern for a colleague who has experienced just an insurmountable amount of grief with his family. And I want all of our fellow Americans watching to know that we did that because we care about each other and we don't want bad things to happen to each other. And our heart hurts when they're due. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of folks over there who don't like me too much, and there are a few of you that I don't care for too much. But if anybody had been hurt today, it would have been even more of a catastrophe than we already saw. And I think that's an important point for the country. Another important point for the country is that this morning, President Trump explicitly called for demonstrations and protests to be peaceful.
He was far more, you can moan and groan, but he was far more explicit about his calls for peace than some of the BLM and left-wing rioters were this summer when we saw violence sweep across this nation. Now, we came here today to debate, to follow regular order, to offer an objection, to follow a process that is expressly contemplated in our Constitution. And for doing that, we got called a bunch of seditious traitors. Now, not since 1985 has a Republican president been sworn in, absent some Democrat effort, to object to the electors. But when we do it, it is the new violation of all norms. And when those things are said, people get angry. Now, I know there are many countries where political violence may be necessary, but America is not one such country. Madam Speaker, it was wrong when people vandalized and defaced your home. It was wrong when thugs went to Senator Hawley's home. And I don't know if the reports are true, but the Washington Times has just reported some pretty compelling evidence from a facial recognition company showing that some of the people who breached the Capitol today were not Trump supporters. They were masquerading as Trump supporters and, in fact, were members of the violent terrorist group Antifa. Now, we should seek to build America up, not tear her down and destroy her. And I am sure glad that at least for one day, I didn't hear my Democrat colleagues calling to defund the police. Now, I appreciate all the talk. Now, I appreciate all the talk of coming together, but let us not pretend that our colleagues on the left have been free of some anti-democratic impulses just because we signed on to legal briefs and asked courts to resolve disputes. There were some on the left who said that we should not even be seated in the body, that we ought to be prosecuted, maybe even jailed. Those arguments anger people, but people do understand the concepts of basic fairness. And no competition, contest, or election can be deemed fair if the participants are subject to different rules. Baseball teams that cheat and steal signs should be stripped of their championships. Russian Olympians who cheat and use steroids should be stripped of their medals, and states that do not run clean elections should be stripped of their electors. This fraud was systemic. It was repeated. It was the same system, and I dare say it was effective. We saw circumstances where when Democrat operatives couldn't get the outcomes they wanted in state legislators, when they couldn't get the job done there, they went and pressured and litigated and usurped the Constitution with extra constitutional action of some officials in some states. They fraudulently laundered ballots, votes, voter registration forms, and then they limited review. In 2016, Democrats found out that they couldn't beat Donald Trump at the ballot box with voters who actually show up, so they turned to impeachment and the witness box. And when that failed, they ran to the mailbox, where this election saw an unprecedented amount of votes that could not be authenticated with true ID, with true signature match, and with true confidence for the American people. Our Article III courts have failed by not holding evidentiary hearings to weigh the evidence. We should not join in that failure. We should vindicate the rights of states. We should vindicate the subpoenas in Arizona that have been issued to get a hold of these voting machines, and we should reject these electors. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the objection.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield my time to the Dean of the Arizona delegation, Mr. Grijalva.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the gentlelady from Colorado for yielding time. I'll be very brief, Madam Speaker. There's really nothing left to say. This challenge brought by members of this House, Republican members from this House from Arizona, and a senator from Texas. The whole discussion today this challenge to the 11 electoral votes that are designated for President Biden and Vice President Harris, the discussion today proved there is no merit to denying those electoral votes. There's no legal standing. The courts have proven that in Arizona time and time again. There is no precedent. There is no constitutional violation. But we're here today, Madam Speaker, because of one man and those who are desperate to please him. So what do we have to show for this process today? Fear, a lockdown, violence, and regrettably and sadly death, arrest, present and real danger, threats, and assault on our institution, this House, this Congress, and the very democracy that we practice here. And to what end? What did we accomplish? The reality is that the challenge will be defeated come January 20th. President Biden and President Harris will be the President and Vice President of the United States. So what have we accomplished? To further divide this nation, to continue to fan the same rhetoric of division and us versus them, to paralyze and dismantle our democracy? Is that what we're attempting to accomplish today? The mob that attacked this institution, I hold no member specifically responsible for that madness that was around us. But we do share a responsibility, my friends, to end it. It's past time to accept reality, to reaffirm our democracy, and move on. I would urge my colleagues from Arizona who filed this challenge to withdraw their challenge to Arizona and to the electors that have been chosen to give their 11 votes to the winners in that election. But if that doesn't happen, then I would urge my colleagues to reject this challenge and defend all voters, defend the voters of Arizona, and that democracy that we practice daily in the representation of our constituents. That's what's at stake today. And with that, I yield back to the gentlelady from Colorado and thank her for the time.
I thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, on Sunday, every member in this chamber took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And there's only one vote tonight for those who took that oath, and that vote is to reject this challenge. I yield back.
All the time for debate has expired. The question is, shall the objection to the Arizona Electoral College vote count submitted by the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gozar, and the senator from Texas, Mr. Cruz, be agreed to? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? No! Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Speaker?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
We would ask for a roll call.
The yeas and nays have been requested pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8. The yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device and are reminded to vote when their group is called.
Does any member wish to change his or her vote?
I no, Mr. Mooney of West Virginia, Mr. Whitman, Mr. Vicente Gonzalez of Texas, Mr. Young. Off no on aye, Mr. Johnson of Ohio, Mr. Reschenthaler, Mrs. Walorski. no. Mr. Grothman. Off aye on no for Mr. Grothman.
On this vote, the yeas are 121, the nays are 303. The noes have it. The objection is not agreed to, and without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The clerk will now notify the Senate of the action of this House, informing that body that the House is now ready to proceed in joint session with the further counting of the electoral vote for the President and the Vice President. To remind both sides of the aisle, during the joint session, there are 11 House Republicans, 11 House Democrats, 11 House Senate Democrats, 11 Senate Republicans, 44 members on the floor. Please view the proceedings from your offices. Thank you.
It's not a suggestion, that is a direction in the interest of good
Example to the public of how serious we take the coronavirus threat and the need for social distancing. Please, my colleagues, if you are not participating in the next part of this, please return to your offices.
Oh, were you? We were stuck in here about
I wish to remind members that you have to reduce the number of members on the floor. You're invited to the gallery to witness the proceedings from there in a limited number, so first come, first served.
Chair will receive a message.
Madam Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Secretary of the Senate to inform the House that the Senate is ready to proceed in joint session with the House of Representatives.
What was it?